Padmanabhan as we embark on this wonderful journey together. I call upon Reshmi of First PG English for the prayer and Acharya Anusmarana.
പുകയുമായി നിൽക്കുന്നു ഞങ്ങൾ ഈ പ്രപഞ്ചാദി നാഥന്റെ മുമ്പിൽ സുപ്രമോദം ഉണരട്ടെ മണ്ണിൽ സർവശക്തിതൻ സംഗീതധാര അന്തിവാനം ആനന്ദ ജ്യോതിസും ബന്ധുരമാം ഉഷസ്സും തപസ്സും അന്തഭൂമിയിലെ ഓരോ തരിയും ചിന്തിതാനന്ദമേ നിൻവിലാസം. ആചാര്യനുസ്മരണം. വന്ദേ ശ്രീധര തൃപ്പെരുന്നയമരും ശ്രീപത്മനാഭ പ്രഭോ വന്ദേ ശ്രീധരി പാർവതി പ്രിയസുതം ആചാര്യതേ മംഗളം. വന്ദേ ഭാരത കേസരീന്ദ്ര സുമതേ കാരുണ്യവാരാനിധേ വന്ദേ ഹൃത്തട പത്മമധ്യ സുലസൽ ആചാര്യതുഭ്യം.
Thank you so much, Reshmi. Now, I would like to invite Revati S., Assistant Professor, Department of English, to welcome everyone.
Thank you, ma'am. Good evening. As our country is celebrating the 75th year of independence and as the college is nearing its diamond jubilee, the Department of English, in association with the IQAC of NSS College Pandalam, will be presenting a series of 75 lectures under the title Reading, Rereading and Reconstructing the Nation. On this occasion, I would like to welcome an inspiring person behind this, our principal, Dr. J. Anjana, and inaugurate which is Ajayakumar, Pro-Vice-Chancellor of the University of Kerala. Welcome, sir. Next, I would like to welcome our proactive IQAC coordinator, Dr. Josna in absentia, and our beloved head of the department, Dr. Srigalabi, all the members of the Department of English and other departments of the college, and our beloved students to this program. We are very happy to welcome students, research scholars, and academicians from other institutions to this session. Once again, I welcome all who have joined us today. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Revati. Now I call upon our leading light, our inspiration, Dr. J. Anjana, Principal in Charge, for the Presidential Address.
Respected Ajayakumar sir, dear teachers, and all the participants present here, a very warm good evening to one and all. Today, the Department of English, NSS College Pandalam, is launching our dream project of completing 75 lecture series to be completed by the Diamond Jubilee celebrations of the college as well as the department, that is in 2025. We have selected an all-encompassing title, Reading, Rereading and Reconstructing the Nation. Today, we are extremely delighted and honored to have an erudite scholar as well as a brilliant academician and administrator to inaugurate this lecture series. Dr. Ajayakumar sir is a person who doesn't need any kind of introduction, both in academic and administrative circles. I'm extremely grateful to you, sir, for accepting our invitation to inaugurate this lecture series. I hope all the participants will have a very fruitful session ahead, and hoping to see you all in our upcoming lecture series as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. It is with great pleasure and respect that I would like to introduce our speaker, although he needs no introduction. Our speaker for this evening, Dr. P.P. Ajayakumar, the Pro-Vice-Chancellor of the University of Kerala. Sir was formerly Director of the School of Distance Education, and he has more than 30 years of experience spending quality time on teaching, writing, and publishing across disciplines. He has traveled widely and abroad on various academic and official programs, and as well as a resource person in seminars and conferences. And his areas are post-colonial writing, Canadian studies, culture studies, comparative literature, and of course, as he was director of the School of Distance Education, Distance Learning as well. He has served as expert committee member in UGC inspection committees, evaluation boards, and in the team for the production of study materials and video lessons for e-Padashala, an MHRD project for education through ICT. Dr. Ajayakumar was also awarded the Faculty Enrichment Fellowship by the Shastri Indo-Canadian Institute. It is indeed an honor to have such an eminent academician as the speaker for the inaugural talk, and I welcome you with great respect, sir, for this inaugural lecture.
Thank you very much for the introduction. First of all, I would like to thank Dr. Anjana and the organizers of this program for inviting me to this inaugural session. It is indeed an important thing to look back at Indian independence and the 75 years of independence at this juncture, because we know that 75 years is a considerable period of time to develop a realistic approach towards our nation. So similar programs are being organized in different parts of the country, and NSS College Pandalam has decided to organize 50 lectures on this particular topic. I think that will be a very fruitful exercise for the students as well as researchers belonging to that college. Actually, I would like to talk on reimagining the nation. I think before beginning my talk, I would like to declare that the lecture series has been inaugurated, and I wish all success to this series, and I once again would like to congratulate the organizers for taking pains to organize a long series, lecture series like this. So I will be sharing some of my views about Indian independence and the way in which we imagine the nation. We know that nation at present is a contested term. It is a contested term because there are variety of approaches that has been developed regarding the nation. It is not a kind of benevolence, or it is not with a kind of reverence that we look at the nation in the present. In the past, it was not like that. Nation was considered as a holy kind of concept. Nation is revered. It is even worshipped. And saying something against the nation or being critical of the nation is considered to be unethical and irreverent. but at present we find that it is being contested. The kind of image of the nation as a reverent, holy concept has been questioned and criticized and contested in the present. So it is in this context that we look at the nation, that is India, which is celebrating 75 years of independence. And when we look at India and its long struggle for independence, we find that the struggle for independence was not a one-sided or one-faced one. It was not a homogeneous struggle. We often learn in history books about Indian independence struggle as something that is different from the independence struggles that happened in different parts of the world. It is considered to be a non-violent struggle in which people participated in huge numbers without engaging themselves in violent activities, and which is led by Mahatma Gandhi, Jawaharlal Nehru, etc. So we have a kind of image that has been built in our mind about independence struggle. But I think in that image, we most often forget, or we most often keep away certain things that were originally part of the independence struggle. Or in other words, the image that we have about independence struggle, Indian independence struggle, is not complete. It is most often not the real picture that we have about the independence struggle. It is to a great extent a one-sided picture or a limited one, because Indian independence struggle was a kind of combination of various streams of fights against the British. It is not a mere political struggle against the colonizer or the British Raj. It was a social struggle. It was a cultural struggle. That means the independence struggle has different facets. It has different phases. At one and the same time, it is a political struggle and a cultural struggle and a social struggle. In what sense do we understand it as cultural and social? Because the main thrust of the struggle is political. It is true that it is chiefly a political struggle, but at the same time, when we look at different parts of the country and the different movements that came into being as part of independence struggle, we find that there were fights against feudal lords, there were fights against caste domination, there were fights against superstitious beliefs, there were fights against regional imbalances, fight against religious differences, and so many other movements were part of the mainstream of independence movement. So independence movement is not one, but it is many. It is not limited to a political struggle. It has many other facets other than the political. When you look at Kerala itself, we find that there were many movements, especially in Malabar. You find the movement of the peasants. The peasant struggle was very much part of independence struggle. the fight against the feudal lords, the fight of the ordinary peasants against the feudal lords was part of independence struggle. And the fight against caste domination, both in Malabar and Tiruvidampur, and in other parts of the country like Maharashtra and many other parts, you find movements developing against caste domination. Even Mahatma Gandhi, to a certain extent, introduced the social aspect into the independence struggle. His observations on caste discrimination and the need to keep away such discriminations certainly shows or throws light on this aspect of the independence struggle. And evidently, it was a movement for religious unity and against religious differences. It actually proclaimed the unity of various religions. One of the leaders of independence struggle, Dr. Sarojini Naidu, wrote a poem, Awake. It is a small poem, very simple poem, and in that poem, Awake, she refers to the various children of India, and she considers India, the nation, as a mother. And all these children, that is Hindus, Muslims, Christians, Parsis, Sikhs, all these children of India are praying to the mother. They are praying for the liberation of the mother. So considering India as the mother and various religious groups as children of that mother, that is the kind of metaphor used by Sarojini Naidu, and not only Sarojini Naidu and the other political leaders, in order to create an impression that the various religious groups belonging to India are one and they are united in their fight for freedom. So it is a religious, that means that means divisive tendency also. Unity of religion was one of the important slogans in the fight against the colonial power. So that is why we can say that the independence struggle was a conglomeration of various struggles. It is a combination of divergent struggles. It is not just one political struggle that we had in India. And looking at the concept of India, what is actually India? We often think of or speak about our tradition, our past, our long history, etc. But can we imagine an India without the British domination? That is a very difficult question that we can ask to ourselves. That means most of the historians believe that India came into being mainly because of the British domination. Before British domination, there was not even a concept of India as a nation. It is true that there were terms like Indies and Mahabharata and such literary works also speaks about Bharat. But actually, the geographical location, geographical space that is termed as India was divided into various small countries before the arrival of the British. It is also a fact that even after the arrival of the British, there was no India, because the nation that we now consider India, even that we can also join Pakistan also, India and Pakistan, was not fully under the control of British. We know that Travancore was under the rule of a king. It was not under British in a proper sense, even though the British had some kind of control over Travancore. There were many such small princely states in India at the time. So we cannot consider the British India also as India, as a model of India. So India actually, as such, the way in which we imagine it, did not exist before the coming of the British, and it did not exist even after the coming of British, even after the Britain took over many portions of the geographical space that is termed as India. So India came into being only after 1947, and in that sense, we cannot claim or we cannot say that India has a very long history. India had a very glorious tradition, etc. But mainly because, specifically because, technically speaking, such an India never existed. And then, even after independence, we come to the reality that India is not, it was not, and it is not a nation in the sense in which nations were developed in Europe. Because the concept of the nation, the idea of the nation, actually developed in Europe. We all know that. And it emerged as a byproduct of, as an after effect of the capitalist development in Europe. So when we say that it is an after effect of the capitalist development, we find that the emergence of the nation needed several supporting factors. What are they? It is not just a piece of land. It is not just a geographical area that has been earmarked with a particular name called France or England. Behind the emergence of England, for example, there existed several other things. What are the other things that existed behind the emergence of a nation? Apart from the geographical location, there existed a common tradition. So a common tradition is certainly one of the important criteria or important things that is needed for the emergence of a nation. A common language, a common tradition, a common language, a common memory, and we also know that a narrative also is necessary. A national narrative is necessary. When you say national narrative, a story about the nation, about its history, about its past, about its long tradition, about its culture, and a literature that will add to that narrative. All these are necessary for developing a nation, not just a geographical location. We need a common culture, common language, common literature. All these are necessary. Sometimes a common racial background. In certain cases, a common religious background also is necessary for the emergence of the nation. Nations emerged in Europe like that, in such a background. And we find that these nations were actually strengthened using or developing more and more narratives that support the spirit of the nation. So looking at India from that point of view, we find that India did not possess any of these characteristics. And that is why Jawaharlal Nehru claimed that there is unity in diversity. It is diverse. India speaks different languages. We don't have a common language. People speak different languages. There are racial differences, religious differences, regional differences, and we also find that the people belonging to different parts of India, they look different. Their appearance is also different. The racial character are also different. So there are more differences than unity in India. More of differences than unity in India. But even then, I think it is true that we actually succeeded in going along with these differences. And during the last 75 years, we were able to continue our uh, status as a nation together, even though there were several kinds of threats to the unity of the nation, we were able to sustain our unity to a great extent. And it is also true that we were able to sustain our democracy. That is even more important. We were able to sustain our democracy. This is important because during the time when India became independent, there were many who raised their eyebrows. There were many who believed that India as a nation will crumble into many pieces. That was the kind of impression that even a great leaders, political leaders like Winston Churchill had. You are all familiar with Winston Churchill, who was twice the Prime Minister of UK. He led UK through the World War. You know that Churchill was a voracious speaker. He was a great speaker and he was a great leader. And he spearheaded the fight against racism, that is Nazism, because it was UK and America and Russia who fought, who led the fight against Nazis. He was a fighter against Nazism. But even that Winston Churchill could not keep away from his prejudice against Indians. And the way in which he responded to Indian independence during the discussions that happened in the Parliament, British Parliament in 1947, shows that he had no trust in Indians. He has no faith in the fact that Indians can lead a country successfully. Because he made a comment, he made several comments. One of the comments is that power will go into the hands of rascals. That is what he said. Power will go into the hands of rascals, rogues, and freebooters. Rascals, rogues, and freebooters are actually, these are the terms that he used to refer to Indian leaders, not even to refer to ordinary Indian people, but Indian leaders, according to him, are rascals, rogues, and freebooters. Not a bottle of water or loaf of bread shall escape taxation. Only the air will be free, and the blood of these hungry millions will be on the head of Attlee. That is what he said. So we find that he had no faith in the success of India as a nation. He believed that India will crumble into small nations, and it will be a failure as a nation. So here we find that Winston Churchill was absolutely wrong. The 75 years of growth of India as a nation clearly shows that Winston Churchill, the great leader and visionary, went wrong as far as India, his idea on India was concerned. So in that sense, we actually succeeded. We proved many wrong in leading the nation into a successful democracy, a place where divergent religious groups, racial groups, linguistic groups, regional groups live together. And that is a great achievement indeed. So in that sense, I think Indian nation can boast of its ability, its resilience in facing the challenges, of times and going forward successfully, preserving its democracy. But at the same time, it is also true that there exists still, even after 75 years, there exist several imbalances within the nation. We will have to face these imbalances. We will have to fight these imbalances. We will have to come out successful. Leveling, that means giving equal opportunity and equal rights for everybody. Because we know that there are regional imbalances. Some of the areas, especially the northeast area, and some of the southern states are also not developed. There is underdevelopment. There is still poverty. There are people who are not exposed to education and higher education, especially. And there are people who do not have their own space to live. And so we find that even though some of the Indians have become millionaires and leading industrialists, still the gap between the rich and the poor is increasing. So we were not able to resolve all the problems that we attempted to resolve in the beginning of our independence. We know that poverty, that means alleviation of poverty was one of the slogans. Garibi Ghadavo was one of the slogans in the early part of our independence. But even now, we were not able to put an end to poverty. So employment for all, that was another important slogan. But we also did not succeed fully in that. That is true. But still, we are going forward. And when we look at the nation, when we analyze the nation, we find that the nation, India as a nation, often tried to build itself based on its anti-colonial struggle. It is the anti-colonial struggle that laid the foundation for the nation. And so our narrative, the narrative of India as a nation, certainly is founded on, it remains on the anti-colonial struggle. And this foundation of anti-colonial struggle certainly helped us to unite divergent groups, divergent religious groups, regional groups, and people belonging to different castes, creeds, etc. Because our discourse against colonialism and the colonial domination has the power to unite all the people under one umbrella of the nation. And we succeeded in that. But at the same time, after independence, once the colonialists have left India, we find that these differences began to creep in. And even now, I think it is these differences that are actually pricking us. It is these differences that are trying to creep up now and again, creating problems among Indians and within the nation, and which may sometimes, we don't know, lead to problems of the unity of the nation. It is true that even during independence that crept in, India was divided into two, India and Pakistan. And so that means even at the time of birth, we had a separation. The religious issue crept up at that time. And even now we find that religion and the religious differences certainly is one of the important problems that threatens the nation, the unity of the nation. And there are other issues as well. And one is the caste hierarchy and the conflict between the castes. That is certainly a very important issue that is being debated upon at present. And that also threatens the unity of the nation. And the regional imbalances also crept in at several occasions. The riots in Punjab, the riots in Nagaland, and many other areas of Northeast, and certain kinds of riots in Tamil Nadu. So divisive forces also in Assam also, divisive forces also started creating issues for the unity of the nation. So the nation is always being threatened. It is always being questioned. It is always being, that means, challenged by various forces belonging to different that means realms. And that continues. I think that the existence of the nation is always under threat, but still the nation is going strong. And so we find that the concept about a nation is far removed from India, because India did not model on the concept of the nation that developed in Europe. It is a different model. It is a different model. We know that after the fall of USSR, what happened is that it was divided into several small countries. And in Europe also, even now, there are small countries emerging. But that is not happening in India. So I think our concept of a nation is of a different model. It is still basing itself on the anti-colonial model, anti-colonial nationalist model. And that is still the foundation of India. That is why India is still united, unlike the European nations. And I think a time has come when nation has achieved a status in which it started thinking of developing certain kinds of ways in which we can unite itself. That means the nation as a whole uh, can come up, or it is now coming up on various ways, in various ways, developing various discourses, developing various images, because we know that our country is united uh, based on various kinds of signs that we use. The flag, the national flag, the national day celebrations, Independence Day, Republic Day, and several other celebrations. So through various such discourses, we are sustaining our nation. We are sustaining our memory. And the narratives about Mahatma Gandhi, Jawaharlal Nehru, and many others, we are sustaining our discourse of the nation. But at the same time, it is also important to look at the other side of the nation. We find that beyond the discourses that are popular, there were other discourses. There were many other leaders who contributed for the independence of the nation. There were many other streams of struggles that existed during independence struggle. That is Subhash Chandra Bose and uh, the leaders of the independence struggle like the communist leaders, Ambedkar, and all these leaders are also, or they also should appear as part of the discourse of the nation. Most often that does not happen. So Indian independence struggle and the discourse of independence has been limited to a few. And so we have to broaden that, because one of the historians, Bipin Chandra, I don't know whether you are familiar with that name. Bipin Chandra is a famous historian who wrote a book on Indian independence struggle. And Bipin Chandra was working at Jawaharlal Nehru University. At that time, he had a project to write about Indian independence struggle. And that project actually aims at exploring the unknown or unsung heroes of Indian independence. That means those struggles which were actually not recorded or in the history books, which were actually not hailed by others or known to others. And as part of that project, he visited all parts of India. He traveled all over India. He came to Kerala. He came to Kalyaseri also. And he met KPR Gopalan. And he met many other leaders who were actually living at that time. This happened during 1980s, early 1980s. And he conducted several meetings at different locations, met lots of people, took notes or took ideas from them. And so his exercise or his whole project was to trace the history of independence struggle, which were actually not part of the accepted or approved mainstream history of independence. Because there were several smaller fights, struggles that happened in different parts of India as part of independence struggle. They were not recorded. They were not. We know only Jawaharlal Nehru and only the mainstream leaders. There were many others. So Bipin Chandra's project was to explore the unexplored area of history that is part of Indian independence struggle. And he published that in the form of a book. You can go through that book. So like that, we find that we have to, I think, consider independence or the struggle for independence, as well as the history after independence, from a very broad perspective, and take stock of all the various streams of struggles and thoughts and ideas and the kind of movements that happened in different parts of the country as part of independence. We have to take stock of that history. So the little histories, little incidents that happened in different parts of the country, and then only it will become complete. So when we look at India as a nation, we find that we don't have to consider it as a united nation, because unity is not actually part of the concept of a nation that on which India is built on. We can have a ceremonious unity, a theoretical unity. Apart from that, I think we should look at India as different, and that is extremely important. Even the Nehru said that India is a nation which has unity in diversity. I think we have to focus on the diversity of the nation first, not just on unity. We don't have to create a forcible unity, but focus on the diversity. At the same time, we should be able to accept the differences, accept the diversity that is part of India. In that sense, we are different from other nations. So accepting the diversity, accepting the differences, we can still continue as a nation. That is what we what we are trying to prove, or we should prove. So the differences in language, differences in religion, differences in race, differences in caste, differences in regional kinds of cultural differences. All these has to be accepted as it is. Why should we say that we are one? Keeping away these differences. We don't have to keep away the differences. We should let the differences remain. Still, there can be a kind of concept of a nation. We can live together, understanding these differences. I think the concept of America as a nation where all different cultures merge and become one, it becomes an area where everything merges into one. I think India is not such a culture. India is a nation where we don't want to allow different cultures to merge together and to become one, but an area where we allow the differences to exist. I think India as a nation should now hail the multiplicities that is part of the nation, and hailing that multiplicity, we should allow the differences to exist or coexist in the body of the nation. I think at this juncture, when we are celebrating 75 years of independence, we can say very confidently that ours is a very different model, and we are practicing a different kind of tradition, which is totally different from the idea or the concept of a nation developed in Europe. And we have succeeded in practicing that. So, wish you all a very happy celebration of the 75 years of independence. And I wish all success to the lecture series that is going to enlighten you all with divergent streams of thoughts on the nation. Thank you.
Thank you.